It is Monday, June 10th, 2024 at 6 p.m. in the Susan Tully Lively Boardroom of the 1887 building. And I'd like to start the evening out by saying the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask Mr. Tadlock to do roll call.
Mr. Andre is excused. Mr. Gayheart. Here. Mr. Gordon. Here. Mrs. Ingersoll.
Here.
Mrs. Costa.
Here.
Mrs. Reckles.
Here.
Mr. Scarrow.
Here.
This meeting has been noticed per state statute. And I don't believe there's any community participation tonight, as I did not receive any cards to be filled there that were filled out or handed to me. So we'll start with the approval of the school board minutes from May 28th, 2024.
There is one change we need to make to that.
Okay.
Under the general and other fund bills, I actually made the motion. Not Mr. Okay. That's the only thing that I saw.
Are there any other amendments or questions? Okay. So looking for a motion to approve as modified.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the May 28th, 2024 regular session school board meeting as modified.
I'll second it.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the May 28th, 2024 regular session school board meeting as modified. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Gayheart.
Yes.
Mayor Gordon.
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll.
Abstain.
Mrs. Costa.
Yes.
Mrs. Reckles.
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to general and other fund bills. Mr. Truitt.
The general and other fund bills this evening covers checks number 152356 through 152431. Wire transfers 023 through 028 and ACH checks number 917 through 819 through 853, and the combined amount of $708,353.88. And then there was a memo providing some additional information on several of the bills in your board packet. Then at the end of the bill listing is a copy of the treasurer's report through the month of April.
Did anybody have any questions for Mr. Truitt?
I think you covered the one on the
Yep.
Friends Square. Just a general question. I noticed the TDS spans anywhere from $90 to $1,900,
Yes.
right?
Well, one of the larger one is we have our internet connection out of Tibbetts.
Okay,
So that's like a fiber connection. So we're paying a lease on that.
okay,
And our other buildings are all connected with our own fiber.
okay.
So the one thing that's nice about, even though it's costly, is it's what's called E-ratable, so we get about a 60% reimbursement.
Oh, super, okay. Yeah, and it may very well have been there before and I just skimmed past it and Mr. Connie just jumped off the page at me.
Any other questions?
More out of a curiosity, what kind of furniture did you buy for the field and venues, basically?
I haven't seen the furniture myself, but I know they're putting it in the used to be the old computer lab, I think the 6th grade one. So part of that is tearing out those old computer cabinets and then see up that flooring and then moving in the furniture. So I can find out exactly, but I have to see it stuff like that.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, then looking for a motion to approve.
I move to approve the general and other fund bills of June 10th, 2024. Check numbers 152356 to 152431. Wire numbers 023 to 028 and ACH 819 to 853. And the combined amount of $708,353.88 as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the general and other fund bills of June 10th, 2024. Check numbers 152-356 to 152-431, wire numbers 023 to 028, and ACH 819 to 853 in the combined amount of $708,353.88. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, we're gonna move on to the first reading of the 2024-2025 preliminary district budget. Mr. Truen, I'm guessing you have a presentation.
And this evening, the board's being presented with the first reading of the 24-25 preliminary budget. And traditionally, the board does 2 reviews of the preliminary budget, so tonight and then the second meeting in June. And then the final, what is titled the original budget, won't be approved by the board until October, when we get all of our state numbers. So these are all preliminary numbers at this point, but our fiscal year begins July 1st. So traditionally, we have an approved budget, or at least preliminary one, before the fiscal year starts. So
And is this the budget? So after the second reading, this would be the budget that's presented at the annual meeting?
correct.
Okay.
Yep. So just to kind of walk through, there's a summary page here, or introduction. The only comments I'll make on that is because we're in the second year of a state budget, a lot of the factors are known in terms of like the revenue cap per pupil amount, some of the aids and stuff like that. Whereas every other year, if we're in a state budget process, there's a lot more unknowns that we're working our way through, a lot more kind of assumptions. So that's helpful as we kind of work our way through this. The other things that we factored in is some of the recommendations that came through from the ad hoc financial stability committees. So looking at some of the debt payoff and then some of the reductions that the committee recommended. So the highlight page then that Jason has up, the first section is just kind of the highlights of the state budget. There's really nothing new in that section. The next one is student enrollment. And at this point, we're assuming kind of status quo with our resident population, but we're assuming 50 additional students through our two charter school programs. So either the options program and the program at CCA.
And or the brick and mortar buildings, we still receive about 40% of our open enrollment to our traditional school settings.
And we'll get the same dollars on all 3 of those programs, basically. So,
And when you say 50 additional, I'm assuming that we've lost some this year or at the end.
we will, because we'll lose seniors.
You'll lose.
Correct. So that's netting out an additional 50 additional students.
So we need to bring in with just the regular turnover rate and also the number of seniors that graduate, around 100 new open enrollment just to get back to even. And our spring number was, I believe, about 120 on the open enrollment in applications. So we look at, typically what we've seen is the spring number kind of puts us to that net zero. And then when the alternative open enrollment window opens July 1, we get a large chunk of open enrollment students. So we're on track at that net zero being right now, and then it's anticipating that July 1.
So we're really looking for an additional 30 at this point in the. Because you said we did the 1 point.
Yeah, I think that gives a little buffer because not all, just because they put in the application, they get accepted,
That's
not
true.
all of them come. So
Sure,
we're kind of playing that, we're at about net zero right now.
okay.
And then from July 1 and all the way through the school year, we still have people open enrolling in April, May, even for the following school year. And then those all get prorated
Okay.
as they go throughout the year.
We'll do a snapshot in September as we kind of finalize the budget for the year. But Jason's right, as we start looking at the numbers even after that time frame, numbers have increased. So that's helpful as we start projecting for 24, 25.
Okay.
Budget reductions or savings, there's a number of things that we've identified, looking at transportation routes as being one of those. We have a meeting next week with the bus company to kind of go over their recommendations, but at this point, we're assuming reduction of 2 routes through efficiencies. We've done some reorganization with full-time to part-time with some of our custodial vacancies, so there's some savings resulting there. By reducing the number of instructional days, there's some slight savings, utilities, transportation, and the number of school year days for support staff. Fund 80, we're looking at doing some reorganization, which is reducing the community resilience outreach position, but then also adding community health coordinator, which that's some savings, the combination there. Reduction in instructional positions, 3 is what we're looking at this point. And I think all of those are focused right now at the elementary level. Reduction of 2 aid positions through attrition. We're assuming an increase in student consumable fees. That would be from $25 to $30 for the annual consumable fee. Freeze off 400 to 500 supply and equipment budgets, keep gas and electrical costs at current level. We know rates are going up, but we're finding some efficiencies as we're looking at using some of the software we have in terms of avoiding some of the peak charges, particularly in electrical.
Yep.
And we're seeing those savings already.
Yep.
We had startup costs, which was one time for lacrosse, so we don't need that any longer, so we can
Yep.
reduce that off the budget.
Yep.
The impact of the additional 50 students through open enrollment is fairly significant. And then any other staff adjustments yet to be determined. We're seeing as we're kind of hiring and filling vacancies where people have left and we've hired new people, that there's definitely some savings in terms of that as well. Certainly on the salary end, we'll see how the benefits shake out based on what they elect for like health insurance and such. Staffing wise, we're looking at 2 transfer of service which apply for special ed. So one is a special ed aide. I believe that's going to be at the elementary level, and then a special ed teacher at the high school level. And then as part of the anticipated increased enrollment at Career and College Academy and Options Blended Learning, we're looking at additional teaching positions in those 2 facilities as well.
Yeah.
Overall highlights, general fund, we assumed a cost of living adjustment of 4.12% for all of our staff. You recall this year, I think the increase was about 1.4 or 1.5 for professional and our support staff. Our contracted rate increase is 3%. We're budgeting 4% on health insurance at this point, and hoping that that figure holds true as we progress along. With that, though, we have a deficit of about $3.4 million in our general fund. State equalization is a real rough estimate at this point, and I share that with the board because what's going on in MPS and that uncertainty will affect every school district in the state in terms of how the aids shake out. So that's probably the one little bit wild card. We will get an estimate because the state's required by law to provide us one on July 1st. The question is what accurate data they're going to have with the districts to make that projection. And with MPS being about 10% of student population and size, it has an impact on everyone else. So, our federal ESSER funds will be exhausted. We're basically using those up this year. Pending a decision on potential operational reform, the budget assumes we're going to hold on some items, some purchases such as Chromebooks, and then our yearly maintenance budget as well. So that's about $800,000. The monies are built into the budget. We're just not going to be spending those until we know more as we progress through the school year.
Got it.
So overall total proposed tax levy increase is about 2.48%. Or about $552,000. Part of that's from transfer service. The general fund as a result of the state aid estimate. Debt service would be going down. We know the voucher deduction will be going up a little bit just based on the dollar amounts that the state factors in for voucher students. And then we also have a reduction of about $80,000 in Fund 80. And then we're assuming, I think, a modest increase in property values of about 2%. Which will then would increase the mill rate by about 0.028 per $1,000. On $100,000 property. Or $8.48 on a $300,000 property. So those are some of the highlights. What follows that is the projection model, and you've kind of seen this before, but it just kind of shows how that factors out in the revenue cap calculation, the difference between revenues and expenses, the deficit, how that affects our fund balance, and then the overall tax levy for the different funds is listed in the gray section. The assumptions that we just kind of went over, and then how that affects on the tax rate or mill rate is at the bottom of that page. Next page is a summary of our debt service. And I'll point out that this is following the debt payment for the defeasance and the cash payment the board approved back in May. So the difference between prior and post, you'll see listed in the lower left-hand corner. So the savings for our taxpayers in terms of property taxes, principal and interest, is just over $4 million, $4.3 million.
Wow, that's great.
The next pages then share kind of more of the detail on the proposed budget. Starts with the general fund, looks at fund balance, makes assumptions relative to the revenues, taxes, any transfer of state aids, either by the state or local school districts. State aids would also be listed below that. And you want to keep on kind of scrolling through there, Jason?
Yeah, I do want to highlight that last year we were originally projecting just how well the district did in managing
Yes.
the budget. We were projecting, I believe, about a $1.4 million deficit, correct?
Correct.
We ended up coming out just a little bit over $1 million positive, so. Okay, sorry, Bill.
Yeah, and then that's the total revenues, then expenses by what's called function level. Instructional, direct instruction is listed first, and then support services is listed second. And that was called not program transactions, which some of that's just accounting entry between the special ed fund 27 and the general fund. So it's basically the balance of special ed that's not funded either through IDEA or state aids. And then the totals listed there, 21 is really like our gift and donation account. And all of the fundraising accounts that the school has. So if you think about the amount of activity, that's over $500,000
Yeah.
either gift, donation as fundraising.
Yeah.
In any given year. Special education, as I mentioned, that's special education's in a different fund. It's kind of a requirement that the state has. So any state aids we get are reflected in the revenue section. The first large number you see at the top of that page, that's the transfer amount. So that's the balance that comes from the general fund to balance the special ed fund. And then kind of going through that, you'll see any state aids we have. Categorical, that's the state special ed aid. We're assuming about $2 million in the state handicap aid, and then any grants that we have, DPI grants, federal, typically IDA, either flow through the preschool, and then either any grants that Emily and her team are able to obtain come through that as well. We also get some monies for Medicaid because we're able to claim some of those charges, that's services that students receive, so we can budget for those revenues as well. So that is all the Fund 27 activity. What follows then is our debt service, and that's pretty straightforward in terms of just looking at our debt obligations. So that's Fund 38 and 39. We used to have a 38, and that was created about 10 years ago when we had an agreement with the city to do payments for the development of Colt Field.
Oh, right.
And this year was our last year on that 10-year arrangement. So That should disappear, and then we'll just have our regular debt service. Capital projects, there's two things going on here, and I kind of listed at the bottom to kind of clarify, because in what's called Fund 49, that's the loan we did with the All Sports Booster Club to do the development of the entry coming into the football field.
Yep.
So they have a balance due. Originally it was about $155,000. The balance due is $75,000. So that's like a negative number in here.
Yep.
And then the positive number is Fund 46, and that's $81,000. And that's the money that we capture through community use of our facilities that we deposit into Fund 46 to use for future maintenance or improvements. So. And then following that is Fund 50, which is our food service budget. That's again another activity that the federal government requires. We have a separate fund for that. Community service fund then is in Fund 50 or Fund 80, and I kind of highlighted the changes in Fund 80. And then the last fund is our co-op program, which is the CCA. And we've always kept that in the package program because years ago we used to have 5 schools that participated. Technically, we just have Williams Bay right now, and then we have a lot of open enrollment.
Okay.
So that's kind of the summary with all the different funds. Following that page, put together kind of a tax levy summary sheet. So the far left for the gray was this year's levy, which is $22.3 million. And then the proposed levy without any operational referendum. And then the impact of that's listed below. And then the far right, which is the purple, could be the impact if the board decides to move forward with an operational referendum. So that would increase the overall levy, but it would also have a positive effect on the debt service. So that net increase with an operational referendum was about 25 cents per thousand. So on a $100,000 home, about $25 the first year, or $75 on a $300,000 home. And those are projections at this point. Questions?
I do want to point out this, what's nice is you can see exactly, here's the cost to run the current college academy. It's in how I'll just point out how efficient they are from an overall dollar standpoint. It's the size, to give you an idea, the high school there is the size of Williams Bay High School now, and their graduating class was only 10 students, I believe, below Bigfoot High School. They pick up a lot of students that junior and senior. So a very efficient operation. We got a lot of made for the buck on.
Yes.
And we have a number of grants that run through that, like Youth Build
Yes.
as well.
Thank you very much, Phil. You poured an enormous amount of time into this. I appreciate all that you're doing to help us understand.
Well, if you got any questions, let me know. I know it's a lot to kind of digest, but you know, this ends up being a journey. It's not really done.
Right.
And there'll be changes by the time we get to October. There always are.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna move on now to the second reading of the revised policy 187, public participation at board meetings. Some number of changes that the policy committee considered. Changes, I don't know if anyone's had a chance, I think you guys may have talked about that at the last meeting.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with Andre. I would like to suggest that we push this back to the policy committee to continue to do some more
Some
scrub
more
work.
revisions.
Yeah. And so I would like to make
Okay.
that a motion.
Okay, all right.
Push it back.
Would
to
anyone else
policy.
like to second his motion?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to take the policy 187, send that back to the policy committee for further review and edits. Looking for, oh no, I guess we have to vote, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. So that one was short and sweet. Next is the director's report from Emily Lind.
Right. Like a good topic following the budget conversation on mental health and well-being. And I brought with me our two mental health navigators, Meg Tamalunas and Kendra Kennedy. So they're gonna help me talk about our comprehensive school mental health services. I always like to bring somebody who's doing the work in the buildings, and I feel like they deserve, you know, this presence to be able to share all the hard work that they're pouring into it. So we're gonna kind of tag team the slides. I'm starting out with just a kind of an overview of, you know, kind of what is a comprehensive school mental health system and what are those services that we're trying to pull together and provide for our students. So this explanation comes from the DPI website, but essentially what we're trying to do is pull together a system that has a continuum of supports and services that focuses on prevention, early intervention, and treatment supports for all of our students, kind of going along the lines of that before stage 4 philosophy. I don't know if you guys saw that at all through the mental health like stigma work that was being done, but really looking at this as anything else, like the earlier you catch something, you know, related to mental illness, the better the outcomes. And so being able to have a system that focuses on prevention is really, really important to all of our students and our staff. So the state outlines 6 main areas. So if you go back for 1 second, Jason, these are the 6 main areas that they're looking for schools to have in place. And I'm going to show you at the very end some of the funding that's attached to this from the state. But I'm going to kind of walk you through what this looks like in Elkhorn in the next few slides. So Jason goes forward. So for our continuum of mental health supports, it's similar to like our tiered interventions and systems of supports for academics. So if you think of mental health and behavior supports through that lens, you're looking at wanting to have universal education and systems in place for students to learn how to manage stress, how to engage in healthy behaviors, how to problem solve, and really working with our teams in the building to really create that culture of belonging through relationships and conversations with students and all those things that our teachers do so well. And then at that secondary level, looking at, you know, offering small groups when kids need that opportunity to build skills, our positive behavior supports and services where we have teams at the building level looking at, you know, students who may be struggling and what they can put in place to provide intervention, might be counseling within our building. And then at that tier 3 level, looking at either individual services or possibly referral to therapy and wraparound services in the community. Our system of collaboration, we have a very strong PLC model in this district at both the building level and the district level. And our social workers and mental health navigators have worked really, really hard with our partnering agencies to develop a, I would say, PLC model, because they're meeting on a trimester basis and looking at how can we improve our system? How is this flow of work working? Are there things that we can do to improve? And we're constantly seeking to expand services and just basically make it more fluid and accessible. So that's been something that's been really great. On this next part, the needs assessment and resource mapping. Our elementary school counselors and school psychs and social workers developed a needs assessment that really focuses on social skills, emotional regulation, and a sense of belonging. And it's just a quick little Google survey that they do with the students to look at, do you feel like you belong at school? Who do you play with at recess? Do you have friends? You know, those type of things. And then aligning small groups for students who may feel left out or who may feel they don't have a connection. They'll align small groups and interventions related to that. Middle school, same thing, you know, has done a really nice job of that needs assessment. Linked there are the actual needs assessments if you want to look at those. And then we've spent a lot of time as a district really looking at our resources And what do we need from a both tangible resources and also professional development? Like, how do we continue to build the capacity of our staff to feel comfortable in meeting the mental health needs of our students that are really expanding in the last several years? So right now we're looking at continuing that development through the SBIRT training, which is basically a model of screening, providing brief intervention, and then referring students to treatment when needed. Perhaps the biggest area of focus that we've had in the last couple of years is really expanding and perfecting our mental health referral pathways. So having more partners, more options for students and families, looking at a flow of that work. And our school social workers have done a ton of work with that, with routing referrals to agencies, scheduling appointments, ensuring there's insurance coverage, working with families, obtaining releases. It's a lot of behind the scenes work that they deserve tremendous kudos for. And then of course we have the MOUs with agencies that just outline what's their responsibility, what's our responsibility, because essentially we're a satellite office for them. Everything else is going through their agency as far as billing for insurance, treatment, all of that, that work. So at the end of the day, why are we doing all this? It does remove barriers for students to access care, reduces time out of class, provides a natural setting for students. It can be scary going into a clinic, sitting in an office with a stranger. Having that at school really provides a level of safety for students. And it's easy access to licensed therapists. So it's been a great, I think, addition, having that expansion. And if you want to roll forward, Jason.
Yeah, I just want to share a personal experience, which kind of highlights the benefit of this. Is we had a 4-year-old that came to live with us in December and needed therapy, psychological services, and having done foster care previously and looking for getting access to the psychological services, the waiting time in Walworth County to get into Dr. Shaw, when I looked a couple of years ago, was 6 months. And so I thought, well, I need to get this prior, so I need to get her access. So I called, the facilities in Milwaukee. It was 8 months waiting list in Milwaukee area, even worse. And so when you think about the psychiatric services, you're talking, medication assistance and that type of help. With the partnership, fortunately, he didn't attend Elkhorn, but his school district has a similar model as to what we have with PSG. He was able to get into their psychiatric services in 2 weeks. And that's the type of help and support and the expediting of the need that we've been able to provide to the families that Emily's really brought in access to in her team, which is just literally a lifesaver for families and for those students. It's pretty. The first time I went through and dealt with that, and they said 6 months, I was like, "Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
This is not something that can wait 6 months." And the alternatives were they have to be at such a crisis level to get into Rogers to get psychiatric help that it's literally life and death situation where they won't take them unless they're looking at doing self-harm. So it's just kudos how significant the support structure and everything that you've got in place is phenomenal.
Thank you. And it really does, that kudos goes back to these guys because they did a lot of work to manage. I mean, it's working with one agency, now working with, we have 6. It's a lot of coordination. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of really, I would say, strong organizational skills, which is really important to keeping that, not missing any students in need and not letting them fall through the cracks and getting everything lined up. So it's been a great team effort, but we're going to talk a little bit more about some of those expanded partnerships in a minute, but I believe, is it Kendra? You want to talk about this next slide here?
So, and for this slide, I'm speaking a little bit for Caitlin Blatter. So she's our middle school social worker and she does a lovely job. But I volunteered to take her middle school slide for today. So just talking a little bit about the middle school needs assessment. So when Emily was talking about like those points that DPI really wants us to hit, doing a needs assessment and kind of really assessing needs within our schools is important. So this is just some data or some things that kind of came out of the middle school one. I would say the biggest things that they were really looking at, they do a really good job of doing tier 2 supports at the middle school. So they do a lot of groups. They've got an age at the middle school that they enjoy groups a little bit more than maybe our high school students. So they ran some groups about anxiety, depression, PBT skills, self-esteem, social skills. About 113 students through that needs assessment had said like, yeah, I'd be really interested in a group, things like that. And then of course, not all students participate, but they had 46 students that they were able to serve at the middle school this year, which was pretty good for that. 12 groups were run by school staff, so they're counselors, school psych, and school social worker. And then our community partners have been really great. If we have a group that maybe we want to run, maybe it needs more specialized skills by one of our therapists or mental health providers, they'll run it for us or with us, like co-facilitate, which is really great. So we had 3 groups that were run by both us and a community partner. So we'll go to the next slide. So for our mental health data for our high school, one of the metrics that we really look at is our YRBS data. So it's our youth behavior risk survey data. This is a survey that goes out every other year. It's an optional survey, like parents can opt their students out if they don't want them to participate in it. It's a national survey where the data is collected, and it goes to like public health and things like that, just to kind of get like a feel of our communities. It's anonymous, which is actually kind of nice because sometimes when we do surveys in the school, kids are not as honest perhaps as they are with the YRBS data. So I kind of feel like our YRBS is a little bit more accurate sometimes. So just some mental health data related to like why are we working so hard, I guess, to really put all the mental health supports under our schools, and this is for our high school. So just some like key points related to mental health. So like about half of our high school students are reporting basically some symptoms of anxiety that we're kind of seeing, and I would say that feels accurate, just working in student services down there. About a third of them are reporting some feelings maybe of depression, so they're feeling sad or hopeless almost every day. 18% of students are reporting having engaged in non-suicidal self-harm. So like, we've got some students who are self-harming or cutting or things like that. 16% have seriously considered suicide. 11% have actually made a plan about how they would do that. And then 6% have attempted suicide. So it was in the last year. So the key point about the YRBS, one of the hard parts about using this data is that it takes a long time because it's a national survey. Them getting the results back to us takes more time than if we do like a needs assessment in the school, where the middle school data was like, they did the needs assessment, they had the data. So this was this last school year this would have been? This would have been last fall, and we just got the data this year. So this is a little bit of a lag.
So what I would say is this data is what we use to really look at system level supports that we need to make sure we have allocated to the high school. So we're looking at, that's probably where we have the numbers in here, but we have a high number of students being seen by outside providers at the high school. We've been working really, really hard to develop protocols for how to handle any suicide ideation. What do those steps look like? How are we all following that? And then more importantly, what are we putting in place preventatively to create that culture of belonging, to really see those warning signs a lot earlier and provide education to people to identify those signs. So I would say the YRBS data is really used more for system level planning of where do we need to target continued support and services, if that makes sense.
And what I always found beneficial is it also gives you a national level, trying to believe a state level comparison as well. And it covers a lot of other topic areas, substance, sexual activity.
Even bicycle safety.
Yeah, they're gonna survey.
All areas, and I think what's concerning, and this is a nationwide trend, all areas on the YRBS have had significant improvement over time, whether it's violence, drug use, sexual activity, and so forth. With the exception of the past 10 years, you've started to see the uptick in the mental health concern.
So this is just a little bit more data and this is related to a grant that Emily's going to talk about in a little bit. But this is just some of our vaping data, because one other thing that we run into a lot at the high school is substance use, and I would say primarily vaping. Kids bringing vapes into schools, kids getting caught vaping, things like that. So this is just some data related to it. So about 13% reported you currently using vaping products. 31% have tried vaping, so it's 1 in 3. And you'll see, like, because it breaks it down, as it gets older, this, the use kind of goes up. So our juniors and seniors particularly. 7% have used cigarettes, 2 cigars, or cigarillos in the last 30 days, and then 58% of students who use these products have tried to quit. So when we're talking about some of the interventions that we're putting in place next year with some grant funds that we got, it's really to help some of these students, because I would say a lot of the times we do have students who say, I started vaping because of anxiety or stress or something like that, and then they recognize they're like, I can't stop. I want to stop, but I can't. So, I think this is next slide.
Yeah. So back to numbers. So this chart shows our current number of students being served this year. So we expanded our school-based mental health services 19% since last year. So serving a total of 261 students in our district, which from the 21-22 school year, I mean, that's a astronomical jump up. And like Jason talked about, the importance of school-based telepsychiatry just due to wait lists. We expanded that in our partnerships with 2 agencies, and also being able to access psychological evaluation through them too, to kind of help streamline that.
Because that's at least a year wait through children's. And so being able, I think we got that done in 2 months. So it is a substantially faster route to achieving some of these things that help inform decisions for parents and for treatment. That's really good. Okay, so expanded partnerships, which Jason alluded to. The addition of the psychiatry and med management has been huge. I think probably, I don't want to say more impactful than the access to therapy, but for parents who are reaching out in a state of exasperation and crisis of, my kid needs help now and I can't get them in for a year. It's unbearable to like watch, and so to have that access, I think at the most I've seen is like a 3-week turnaround with these appointments, and highly collaborative with the option of allowing school members close to the child to sit in, of course with parent, permission and everything. But that can be helpful because kids present different, right, at home and at school. They present very differently a lot of the time. And I think it's important for those psychiatrists to have all the information when they're making high stakes decisions about medications. So that's been really positively and well received by our families who utilize that. We've been able to offer like Nick said, the neuropsych evaluations this year. In all of these things, they either are going through insurance or there's a cost. And so we've been able to leverage some of the grant funds for that, which I'll talk about in just a second. But the other new thing we offered this year was monthly clinical consultation to our staff who are providing and responding to mental health crises with students. So part of the framework is making sure we're also taking care of our staff, right? So huge emotional toll on our staff who are directly involved with students in crisis. It can really, really be hard to carry that weight around and to manage that. And so we tried this year with offering monthly clinical consultation is what we called it, with a licensed therapist to really help reduce the impact of secondary trauma and compassion fatigue. And it wasn't structured as therapy. It was structured as, if you're carrying something heavy, you're struggling with a case, you're struggling with how to support, you talk it through with someone who's a licensed clinical therapist who can give you encouragement, support, like, it sounds like you handled that perfectly, or what if you try this, or how can I help, develop ideas around, this strategy or support. So I think it was more well received than if we would have said, hey, we would like you to attend a therapy session with someone. I think it really felt like more problem solving. Confidentiality was always preserved. Nobody used names when they were discussing cases, but I think it really allowed our staff just to kind of share that weight with someone else and not carry it all by themselves. So I did send out a brief survey to the people who utilized it, and just based those 2 questions. Did you find this useful? Would you use it again? And 87.5% of staff reported that they did find it valuable or extremely valuable. So I feel like it was a pretty well received service. I don't know if we're gonna have the funds to continue it because we did expend our Get Kids Ahead funding. But it's something that I think we keep in the back of our mind as something that our staff appreciated, and if we can find a way to fund it in the future, we should. All right. Credence, similarly with them, so the previous slide was professional services group. So if you see invoices for PSG, those are services they provided. Credence, they also now are adding a child psychiatrist. It just happened this spring. And I think we've been able to utilize that a few times as well. They are being absorbed by ABC Therapy, which is, I think, out of the Waukesha area. Yeah. So you might see some different, different names when they come through on invoices. State Line Mental Health is going to partner with us in the upcoming year on providing AODA assessment and interventions, and that is going to be funded by a grant we received. And our goal with that is to obviously help students reduce vaping use and substance use. Kendra works with the municipal court, and oftentimes there's tickets issued that hasn't shown to correlate with stopping the use of these substances. So we're hoping that we can really provide intervention and support to help them stop.
We also, in this area, I would call it like a substance use treatment desert. I mean, we already struggle with mental health treatment, but we don't have a whole lot of services for substance use. So I think increasing accessibility for these students and families is going to be really key.
So when a lot of times school-based mental health is not a good fit for families, so when that's the case, we do have the ability to refer to outside community resources. So we just wanted to share a couple of them that we use frequently and refer to. Comprehensive Community Services, or CCS, that's a wraparound mental health program through the county. They serve children, adolescents, teens, and even adults. And it's really nice when we work with them at schools because it just brings that wraparound to us. Functional family therapy, children's long-term support program, preventative services through Health and Human Services, crisis intervention. We refer to New Beginnings and the Treehouse for a lot of groups that they do with adolescents and children. And then also day treatment programs and inpatient treatment when it reaches that level. And then the mental health navigators, that's my role at the CCA and SoCOs in Walworth County. So just for the new school board members too, just wanted to kind of give some background on this. So in 2018, the mental health navigator position was created. At the time, it was with the alternative high school. I think there's a large need for mental health and a lot of overlap between the county and the school. So it was created through a state funded mental health grant in partnership with the school district and the county. So the position is 75% school-based and 25% county-based. Through the grant, the position was successful, and it still is, due to the significant increase in the amount of referrals and enrollments and a lot of the resources I had mentioned previously. In addition, it has helped with the navigation of child welfare system, that collaboration and communication with students involved in youth justice, and just being able to streamline referrals and communications between the county, families, and school. A couple of the biggest takeaways since I've been in the position for 3 years and since it's been created is just having a mental health professional embedded in the charter schools to have easy access to students and staff as needed, and just being able to bridge the systems that impact our families and students the most. So that's been really, I think, helpful having this role.
Do we know how many districts in the state have a position like this? I know in 2018, I believe we were the first, correct?
I believe so. And now I know that there's actually a group, a mental health navigator group in the state of Wisconsin. So I'm not sure how many, but I do believe it's grown.
It's very unique, and Kendra is also an employee of the county. So we have 2 social workers that work in that same model of very similar to like our SRO officer who does, where we contract with the county for the service during the school year time that they're with us. But then them being on part of that county Health and Human Services team allows them they're still integrated and they have that greater access, that greater knowledge of all those other outside resources that were pointed out. So I think it's a phenomenal model and something that's really to the benefit of the district.
I actually just met with the mom this morning who talked about how beneficial these two ladies in particular have been to her with connecting her to resources in the county. And I think that it allows for a warm handout. It's not that we couldn't have said, well, there's this program at the county, you should check it out. Here's a link, here's the resources, here's the number. But when you have someone sitting with you, walking you through that and introducing you to the team and being there alongside you, it feels a lot less scary. And it's just, I feel like it's just better for families. It makes it more accessible and more likely that they're going to follow through with accessing those services. So absolutely.
All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my position. So I'm like Meg, I'm also a mental health navigator. So following the success of that position, Years District also collaborated with Walworth County for another mental health navigator position. The timing was great for a youth justice focus. So most of my position, or at least a lot of my position, focuses on reducing youth justice referrals in the community, or to our community, to our Walworth County Health and Human Services. The district was looking at truancy was a big piece, substance use would have been another piece, and obviously behaviors and things like that. So just some objectives as I'm working in this district is developing a system to respond to truancy and just attendance in general. So there's some just different things that we've started to implement in the district. So just improving our attendance practices and communication with families. A lot of the times, especially after COVID, communication around attendance has been hard, and it's not just in this district, this is a national trend. So just as one of those prevention models, improving kind of the language, and as we're communicating with families about attendance, as we're sending out attendance letters and how we're talking to families about attendance and the importance of like being here. So I think as a general statement, our nation isn't valuing in-person education as much, like that instruction time that we all know is so important. Our community has kind of lost sight of that sometimes. And then focusing on root causes for attendance concerns and addressing them as needed. So historically, when kids weren't coming to school, it was because of more like behaviors or truancy. So we're focusing more on, a lot of times in our district, it's maybe mental health, or there's other pieces happening, which we'll talk about. Another goal is implementing restorative practices. So reduce our exclusionary discipline model when appropriate, teach accountability, confidence, and healthy rupture and repair skills in our classroom for our kids. So we did awesome this year. We trained 133 staff. We focused a lot on that 4K elementary level to really get that those foundational restorative practices skills in place. And our plan for the fall is to roll out with middle and high school. And then we collaborated with municipal court to create a holistic response to truancy. So this year, 35 students were referred to me through the municipal court specifically. So like they had truancy tickets or something like that, and that's how they kind of circled back around to me. Typically, I'd already tried to do some prevention work with these families. But the really great thing is our municipal court has been lovely and has really tried to help us support these families and seeking services. Like they're really focused on addressing what's happening versus, I guess, punishment for the sake of punishment. So they'll really help us encourage, like, okay, well, no, you really need to try counseling now, because it looks like the main reason why you're not coming is depression or anxiety, and you're not accessing that service. So this is going to be something I'm gonna, recommend, or you have to get assigned. So they've been really great about that. And then for those 35 students, 30 formal community service referrals came out of that for just those 35. So some of it was like CCS and therapy, or some of it was functional family therapy or groups.
I would just add on to that really quickly. When I think there's different understanding of restorative practice, so I just want to clarify for a second that our approach with that is really looking at high accountability for students and high support.
Yeah.
So it's not just high accountability. We're keeping the high accountability, but we're adding high support. So, you found yourself here in front of the judge. That's still there. You're accountable for your actions, but how are we going to support you so that this doesn't happen again? So it's high accountability, high support. The other piece with it is just really creating a culture of belonging so that students want to be in school and they feel they belong there.
If anyone has any more specific questions on restorative practices, I'm happy to talk more about it. Just going briefly for it. So just attendance in general, so about 102 students were referred. There could have been a lot more, but those were the ones that I was really trying to focus on this year. Because there's a lot of families right now who are just kind of struggling with attendance, particularly at the high school level. And some of those common root causes that I was talking about, so I'd say in this district, because part of my role is I work with other districts, so I get to talk with other school social workers there and see the trends that they're seeing in our county. I would say this district, a lot of mental health, so that anxiety, depression, keeping kids out of school. Sometimes it's parenting skills and support, so like parents want them to go, but they don't know how to kind of maybe enforce that accountability, and it's hard, so. And then sometimes it's academic or communication skills, but typically I would say it's the first two. And in response to one of those, I really love working with parents. It's like something I did previously. So when we kind of identified that need and we know that it's hard, that's something that we can always do. We put in Parents in Action Group, which was an evidence-based active parenting curriculum. It was 6 weeks. I had 7 parents come. 2 of them were mandated by the court, and then 4 of them had already been to the court, but they weren't mandated. It was just, which you can kind of see that link with the youth justice piece. And it was great. They learned a lot of skills, their relationships improved at home, and it's something that I'd like to do more of again to really help support the parents in this district because it's a family system.
All right, so I think the 5th component of the comprehensive mental health system is sustainability. So looking at how are we going to sustain these services and supports. This is just a snapshot of the grants and the funds that we've used to supplement this work last year and this coming year. So we have the vape prevention grant, which is new. We just got that. That's for $90,000. So we'll be using that with the partnership with State Line to provide those interventions and supports, and that's a 2-year grant. And we're also going to be looking at some universal supports with that money, like the Catch My Breath program, which I think they're going to incorporate into the health curriculum, just teaching kids about vaping and the impact of that. We have the Youth Justice Grant, which we're in the 2nd year of. The initial award was $175,000. We got the continuation grant as well, which was $112,000. And so that's still going and funding Kendra's position with us in the county. We have the Get Kids Ahead money, which you've heard a lot about, I think, over the last couple of years. That's all gone now. So we spent that all this year. Well, it's been over the course of a couple of years.
Yeah.
It's gone now.
Yeah.
It's gone now. But it was $100,000 in replacement of the Get Kids Ahead money. The state is now giving out the state aid for mental health. This is new. We haven't seen the money yet. It's supposed to come in June. And that's per pupil amount, right, Bill? 31.57. So that's about how much we'll get for that. And so that too will continue to support these services and things we have in place. They're going to reduce that amount the next year, and it's only going to be
$12.
yeah, like a third of it.
Yeah.
So we're just constantly,
Significantly lower than what was.
it's like a third of it. Yeah.
So it's
I think we're just, we're always chasing the money, like, what grants are out there, what can we apply for? Katie James has been amazing in helping us get these grants in, and she's so meticulous in her work, like we've been successful in achieving those. So yeah, our next steps are just to continue to expand our in-house interventions. We want to continue to support professional development for all of our student service providers and staff, and really just implement the services that we just talked to you about that are in line with the grants we applied for. One big thing we want to formalize a little bit more closely moving forward is our student assistance program. We do want to have a more formal process for how are we accessing those funds for students who have a gap in insurance or no insurance, and what does that look like? So we're working on that, and we're hoping to have that in place next year with a little bit more formal process to follow. But any questions for us at all?
Got 2.
Yes.
First of all, what is DBT skills?
Sorry, I should have explained that. It's a type of therapy, so dialectical behavioral therapy, and that's for students who really struggle with like intense emotions and they struggle with emotion regulation. So, if you've got kids who've got big behaviors in the classroom, or sometimes it's even like suicidality or things like that, it really focuses on helping them learn to self-regulate.
It basically, the way I would explain it, in addition to that, would be a lot of times when you find yourself in a position with a student like that, they're struggling with all or nothing thinking. So it helps students to recognize that very, very few things in life are all good or all bad. And some things we just have to let pass us on by, kind of ride that wave. And now we're back at status quo or a regulated state. So I think it helps with the extreme thinking of it's all good or it's all really bad. And it helps students to cognitively think about things as just things happen and, it's not all bad or all good. And we're kind of moving along in our journey.
And then two things can be true at the same.
Two things can be true at the same time, could be bad and good, yep.
And it works a lot on like interpersonal effectiveness skills too, and distress tolerance, so yeah.
The other question I had was, 2 years ago, we were serving 109. And last year, this present year we just finished, is 261. Are we identifying more or what do you think is the reason for the jump?
So a couple things, you guys can add in, Jason, you might have thoughts too, but we've expanded the partnerships, number one. So before we worked primarily with one agency, so there were wait lists every year. There was kids on waiting lists to get in that weren't able to be serviced because of the wait list. So by expanding the agencies and the number of therapists, we don't have wait lists. Everybody's connected who needs to get in. In addition to that, I guess I would hypothesize that maybe a reduction in the stigma around receiving services, an increase in students just being, I don't know, willing to recognize that they need those, sort of kind of like the early stages, like I'm not feeling myself, something's not right, I need to reach out for help. Parents are reaching out more.
I would say that kids are talking to each other. They notice maybe if a kid leaves for a while, and they're like, oh, hey, where were you? And a kid says, I was seeing my therapist. And that, especially with the ages that we work with, middle and high school especially, that peer normalization of asking for that help and things like that and accessibility has, I think, made it so that we can serve more kids, because more kids are in some ways coming forward. Some of those numbers too, some of those kids have carried over, like especially our highest needs kids. So some of that 109 may be still being served. They might have transitioned from middle to high school as well. Not a huge number of them, but something.
It's still, that's a big jump still. How are you guys holding up with that?
I think it's really, good to just see that we have this access now and we're able to help provide that and help navigate these services for our students and families.
I think the biggest complaint I've heard from anywhere is just, at this point, it's just space. Like, they're very happy that there aren't wait lists and kids are able to access the services, but it can be hard to find space in the buildings, for confidential therapy to be taking place. So we're trying to problem solve that through some, scheduling improvements and enhancements. But I think that's the biggest complaint I've heard is like, it's just really hard when we have all these people coming in to always find space. Any other questions?
I have a few. On one of the slides, it mentioned at the high school level that parents could opt out of
The wire best.
yeah. So what does that mean at the elementary or middle school levels?
It's the same.
Okay.
Well, is the middle one.
Yeah, I don't think they do.
They don't do IRBs at the
I don't think they do it at
It's
all.
middle school and high school, and parents can opt out, the middle school, because I know the board received some complaints related to the survey where
Right.
they didn't want the district to administer to any student. We had a very simple opt-out process. All I had to do was click on the link on the Google form and say,
Yep.
don't want my.
Same thing for the needs assessment, that's a Google form. Parents don't have to have their students take that.
So at the elementary level, what kind of how is that survey administered and what kind of questions are?
I believe it was just for 4th and 5th.
Okay.
And the question, I
Okay.
could link that in there too. Taylor sent it to me after the fact, so I didn't put it in there yet, but it's more basic. It's more like, do you feel like you have friends to play with at school?
Okay.
Do you feel like you belong at school? How do you respond when you're feeling upset? Like, it's more basic, just like social skills, I would say, and more like school culture focused, but I could link that in there. for you.
And then when those kids are identified as needing help, are parents notified?
Yep, so
Okay,
you have to have parent written consent to be in a group or
Got it.
individual.
okay, okay.
And same thing with the referral to an agency, the very first thing is a release.
Yeah.
That the parents sign.
Okay,
Yep, you,
Great.
yep, school psychs, counselors, you can't meet with kids without the parent consent.
okay.
Yeah.
I have another question and now I'm not thinking of it, but.
I think and I think that's an area too, we've created two things, going back to Kyle's question, which was a great one, in a way,
Yep.
such that escalation numbers. One is, I think that access and opportunity, it's a
Yes.
lot more convenient to have the kid have their appointment during the day, especially because you're sometimes having weekly appointments.
Yeah,
And to get that scheduled, that availability, it's much more convenient during the day. The second piece, and I know when we had a death of the student, most recently, Dr. Hubnall from Hope Squad came out, the founder of Hope Squad, he met with the Hope Squad students. They had shared that one of their greatest frustrations was a lack of in their communications with their peers and their friends when they were struggling, the lack of support from parents for them to get that help and support. And my hope is that I think we're making headway in that, not just in Elkhorn, but I think, across the nation, societal, you'll see people being more open and honest about their own struggles and sharing that. So to encourage others that, hey, this is something, reach out and get help. But, so I had that same wondering. I hope that with the access and opportunity that we have now, that we should be able to begin to see kind of a plateauing or a benchmarking of, okay, when is.
I think this is correct me if I'm wrong, ladies, but I think this is the first year we didn't have wait lists. So I think at this point, we have the partnerships we need to sustain the services for students. I think last year we still had a wait list. It was
We did.
small, but it wasn't as large as the year before.
Your point, Jason, just triggered my question. So if we have, and I'm not sure what's the length of time that we've been kind of implementing. Now, you said this is the first year that you've not had a wait list. So, but are we tracking these kids at all, like from entering a program or entering something to graduate, are we tracking them at all and finding out what is the effectiveness? Like, are we seeing things improve? Are we,
It's a great question. So what we have is massive spreadsheets
Yeah.
that the social workers have. So each building has a massive spreadsheet. And then when I mentioned those trimester meetings with the agencies, so let's say we sit down with, like, let's just say Credence. So once a trimester, we're sitting down with each agency. It's the social workers, the agency therapist and their director, and they go through the list of students and look at treatment goals, progress on treatment goals. Are they ready to go off of, and it's always the therapist's decision, but we talk about, like, are they possibly ready to, transfer to a school counselor or school social worker? Like, are we ready to take this and generalize into the school setting where maybe instead of seeing a therapist, because this is parent insurance. So these are being billed, the families are involved, they're still treated, they have all the same regulations that they would in their clinic. So if they're meeting with a student, they're informing the parents, they're communicating. Students who are in therapy, the family has to be involved, especially if they're young students. There's a strong family component to that. So the families are involved, but we are also sitting down and looking at how can we support, moving off of this and having a more sustainable system through the school.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a lot more maybe subjective and more difficult to track, like we do with like an IEP, where we have a student who enters with an IEP leaves without an IEP, at what point, did they achieve all their goals and stuff like that? I just didn't know if we had.
I think that's a great question, and I would say each agency also, like, that's what we do on the school side.
Yeah.
But each agency also does that a little differently. Like, some of them will create reports of, they give pre and post measures of,
Yeah.
Hey, these students came in, we have these scores on these pre measures, this is our post measures. At the end of the day, if they're billing families insurance, the
Yeah.
family at any time
That's
can
true.
decide,
Yeah.
we're done, we've had
Yeah.
enough, my child seems like they're doing better.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it is still, I mean, the parents have a very large piece in this
Of
because it
course.
is going through their insurance.
Yeah.
If they're on our student assistance program, we're touching base, which means we're paying for the sessions.
Yeah.
We're touching base every 6 sessions and looking for an update on treatment goals.
Okay.
And that's the part that I'd like to formalize even further.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're working on trying to keep tabs on that, but sometimes the parents, like, we might think, wow, they're doing a lot better, or sometimes we'll have parents that say, I want my child to continue in therapy.
Mhm.
So it is still, especially if the parents are paying for
Yeah.
it, it's still their ultimate call.
Mr. Jordan, remind me how, so obviously we have students that we're paying for. Is there a reimbursement from the state at all at a certain level on those, or are we
For these
just
type of
straight paying
services,
for it?
typically no, but I
Okay.
mean, we do have other services that we provide which are Medicaid eligible.
Okay,
And we do get reimbursed for those, so in a typical year. We probably receive reimbursement, I think we budget about 140,000, we usually around 2 to 225.
okay,
125,000,
so.
but that's all the way across.
So it's a little bit better than 50% that we're reimbursed.
Didn't a lot of our Get Kids Ahead fund went towards that. Right, like.
Yeah, but I think we're talking two different
Oh,
things,
sorry.
so I'm talking about like the Medicaid reimbursement
Yeah.
component, so.
Yeah.
Through Compass Care, so the reporting, the unit reporting that the special ed staff.
But we don't do that for therapy through
Correct.
agencies,
Right,
right?
they're different things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. I think the thing with that, Julia, is we would like to help families get connected with insurance. So
Yeah.
if this is like an urgent situation, my child needs to start therapy.
Mhm.
What I'd like to come up with is some type of a system, like how many
Yeah.
sessions are we covering?
Yeah,
And in the meantime, how are we helping you get connected to insurance?
right,
Whether that be through Medicaid or state aid
right,
or whatever that may look like. or
Yeah.
would be.
other questions?
No, I just think that it's really critical and that we prioritize those. Sessions of our counselors, psychologists and the pool and those student services to have that opportunity to continue with the. Connecting with the licensed therapists on that. I know in working with them when we've had the crisis situations, it's. Tough and they need that help and support. So it's a priority that we need to, even with the grant funds gone, we can't take. That support away. We need to find where to come up with that. So that they have that support.
Right.
Because their mental health and well-being, they can't do their jobs and provide that support and they don't have that support.
Right,
And on the flip side too. An unintended positive from that is their own confidence and their own ability to respond to these situations is growing.
Mhm.
Because they're receiving that feedback, encouragement, and then hopefully over time, they do feel more comfortable accessing and responding to that. Does that make sense?
And I wanna normalize it too, so for me as mental health navigator for the 6 years before I came to the school district as a therapist, so like I was doing clinical work all the time with families and.
Yeah.
I would have suicidal kids or, I would be working with families with really complex issues and. Weekly supervision, which is essentially clinical consultation where you're meeting with another licensed therapist who's not in it. They can kind of look at it more systemically and be like, yeah, you did everything that you needed to do. Like you covered your bases and then you get to kind of work and talk with somebody about like what would be effective or helpful or things like that. It's very normal for people providing mental health services. And then when I got to the school, I was like, so when do we talk about these? Like, you know, so it was such a great opportunity, and it was like a more formalized process and like how to provide it, and I think it was really beneficial for everybody, and it really helps prevent that block care and burnout and things like that, so.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to personnel.
All right, the personnel sheet is there, it's quite lengthy, this is the hiring and shifting season, so. Any questions related to any of the items on personnel sheet?
I just have one question.
Mhm.
I know we hired Nick Rockweiler very recently. We must have hired him in, was it social studies? And then
Social
and we
studies
shifted him
and
to math
when we
already
had a math
before he had a
opening.
chance to get started?
Well, he requested, yeah.
Oh, he did.
said math is my favorite subject
Got
and I shift to the math positions.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes. On all of the transfers, we always do the best we can. It's not always possible, but we
Sure.
do the best we can to align people to the position that they want to, assuming they're qualified and capable to do that, so.
Mhm. Okay. So just looking for a motion to approve the personnel recommendation sheet.
I'll move to approve the personal recommendation sheet for June 10th, 2024, including new employment contracts conditioned upon passing the background check and district mandated drug screening as presented.
For a second?
Second.
So moved and seconded to approve the personnel recommendation sheet for June 10th, 2024, including new employment contracts conditioned upon passing the background check and district mandated drug screening. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? And we are coming to the end of, just have announcements left.
Okay, on the announcements, I've got a number of them. Just a reminder that the meetings will be held on the next school board meeting, Monday, June 24th, and then Monday, July 8th. At the 1887 building. The Summer Academy session 1 begins on June 17th. Session 2 begins July 18th. Free meals for all children 18 and under will be available during the Summer Academy between 11:45 and 12:10 p.m. At the middle school, and the meals are grab and go. Does that also include seniors, Bill?
I believe so.
Okay, that's, I know seniors are also a part of that meal program and that grab and go if they would like to.
I'd have to verify with actually, if that was included as part of the approval contract, so we should probably
Let's
verify
double
that.
check that. All right.
The biggest change this year is the grab and go. Because last year they had to stay on site as part of
Oh,
summer school, there was a
Okay.
federal requirement,
Yeah,
so the feds realized that probably just isn't practical, and parents are waiting to pick
Yeah.
up their kids.
yeah.
So that's,
Lots of not happy participants
Yeah.
in that, and like,
Yeah.
really, my kid has to sit here and wait.
you had to tell them to
Yeah.
wait, and the parents were, it's just didn't
Yeah.
make any common sense.
This is good.
Compromise.
You know,
Yeah.
and then we have the annual meeting on July 22nd, 2024 at the high school auditorium. And I wanted to share that we have been working with Palmer Hamilton over at the high school as they acquired a company called Respawn. Any video gamers might be familiar. They do gaming furniture and chairs. And as part of that, they approached us and offered to recreate our high school esports lab and make a significant donation to cover the large bulk of the cost. I think they just asked the high school to put forward $5,000 to have a little bit of skin in the game. This is a draft of the model of the room that they are proposing and what it'll look like. We don't have an open room at the high school.
Right.
So we have to have a dual as a classroom.
Yep.
So it's not just an esports lounge.
Mhm.
And so they had to get creative with that, but they're wanting it to be like a showcase place. So they have customers or clients that come in that they can come and visit and see the school space as well. So I hyperlinked this in the board notes, but this is the classroom, you might recognize the glass
This is Mr.
wall.
Martell's. Or
Miss-
not Martell.
Mr. Iserloff.
Iserloff, yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I thought. I'm like, I was just in that classroom. I remember that.
yeah, so
Yeah.
this would be Mr. Iserloff's room and he'll have the,
Nice.
yeah. So that's in there and so very appreciative of them.
Yeah.
Bringing this forward, it'll be a great donation to the district. I think the kids will be excited about it and it'll be a neat instructional / esports space, which I believe esports, I'd have to double check the numbers this year, but I know I think last year was our largest
It's over 100, right?
program. Yeah, it was approaching 100 students,
Yeah.
which is almost 10% of the entire high school.
Yeah.
Esports, the musical is up there too, as far as our largest co-curricular programs,
Yeah.
larger than football, larger than
Mhm.
as far as our musical esports.
I have one quick thing. If you haven't been out to Tibbetts, the mural looks.
Oh,
fabulous.
yeah.
Mural looks great. If you come, if you can get out there
Yeah, yeah.
because
Oh,
Highway
true.
1267 is closed.
Right.
But yeah, come from the west
Yeah,
on a going towards the going east
Got it.
and you can see it. It really looks fabulous.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for the
Thanks for-
reminder.
Yeah,
Hearing that,
yeah.
I also have an announcement.
Okay,
I just received an email today that a week from tomorrow, on the 18th, will be CISA 2 Annual Delegates Convention
okay.
at Whitewater. And I'll let you know what it's all about.
Awesome. We look forward to hearing back. So,
You were the delegate appointed.
yes. So that might be something to add to the agenda for the
Yeah.
next meeting, is a report from Mr. Gordon.
All right.
Okay, just looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved to and seconded to adjourn. All in favor? Oh, no, we have to do roll call. Roll call vote, please.
All right, Mr. Gayheart,
Yes.
Eric Gordon,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa,
Yes.
Mrs. Reckles,
Yeah.
Mr. Sparrow.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, ladies.